Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host Cheryl Hentz. Very pleased to welcome back to the show someone who's been on not just a little bit in the past, but she's been on a number of times since she's joined Community for Hope. My guest tonight is Sarah Danahy. Am I pronouncing that right, or is it Danahy?
You are. That's correct.
Okay. And she is the Executive Director of Community for Hope, and we're going to be talking tonight about suicide statistics, suicide prevention, anything and everything that we can think of that's associated with suicide, and how to try and get a handle on this if we ever can. So I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
And I've got all kinds of stats that we went over before we started here. It is a huge, it's a major national public health issue. 1 out of every 15 people are depressed. I expected that number to be a little bit higher, given everything we've been through in the last few years. But 1 out of every 15 people are depressed, and each day approximately 123 people in this country die by suicide. And the number just keeps going up. Now, the latest numbers I found nationally were from 2021 and from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And check me if I'm wrong on this, Sarah, but I think the last time you were on, suicide was the 11th leading cause of death in the U.S., and now it is the 10th. Claimed, well, let's see here. According to numbers from 2018, there were nearly twice as many suicides in this country as there were homicides. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is an astounding number. It's crazy. Yeah. And in 2021, I'm hoping this is correct, 12.3 million adults seriously thought about suicide. 3.5 million adults made a plan to commit suicide, and 1.7 million adults attempted suicide. In that same year, 48,183 people were successful and died by suicide. And that's 1 death every 11 minutes in this country by suicide. That is crazy.
Yeah, if you think about, and I think that number has gone up slightly in the last couple of years. I think close between 53 and 55,000 people in the United States have died by suicide each year. And sometimes I'm a very visual person, so I like to think about, try to put that into context. And so if you think about Lambeau Field, right? And I always joke with when I'm doing trainings, QPR, question, persuade, refer trainings, and I talk about this. I joke around that I'm sorry, I'm not a Packer fan, but I think Lambeau holds around 80,000. It is. It's. I always try to just throw it out there at the beginning.
Might as well.
But about half. So if you think about half of Lambeau, so if you've been to Lambeau when it's full, and you think about half of those individuals.
Even just seeing the stadium on TV when it's full.
Yeah, and so about half die by suicide every year in this country.
And if you want to put it in an even more local context, our population in Oshkosh is about 66,000 people. It might be as high as 68,000, but that would be almost the entire population of Oshkosh.
Yeah, it really puts
for
it in
about 10,000 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty bad.
And if you think about, I sometimes also think that, so that 55,000 approximately individuals that die by suicide, and then you think about the number of people, again, like you mentioned, that have thought about suicide, have made a plan about suicide. Yeah. The number of individuals in our country who are currently in some sort of mental health treatment, the number of individuals who are struggling with a mental health crisis and are not seeking treatment. Yeah. I mean, we have a real big mental health crisis here in our country.
We really do, and it flares up. Of course, we think about it, I think, more prevalently when we hear about mass shootings.
Sure.
That's when we tend to think about mental health issues. Otherwise, I don't know that, as a general rule, most people are really thinking about it a whole lot.
Not in general, and I think one thing that's important to think about is that when Community for Hope was started in 2001, it was started because of a string of adolescent suicides. And so that was really our focus. Over the last 10, 15 years, our focus has really shifted from adolescents to middle-aged white men. Middle-aged white men are at the highest risk of suicide in our country, in our state, in our county.
And why is that, do you think, Sarah?
Oh, it's a great question. I often ask the groups when I'm presenting QPR trainings, and I'll ask them. And quite frequently, I receive responses that, there is the stigma of mental health and talking about mental health. There's the stigma that makes you weak if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, that men are typically supposed to be the strong heads of the household, and so there is that stigma. And men in certain professions that we also chatted about before the show, certain professions in construction and other areas that are typically employed by men. So we're really trying to get into that population and trying to reach that group of individuals so that we can start to break down that stigma.
Yeah, talking about professions, these are some of the professions with the highest suicide rates in the United States. At the top of the list is medical doctors, then dentists. That one surprised me. Police officers, veterinarians. That one did not surprise me because I did a very in-depth article for a publication in the last 4 months, I guess, where there's such a shortage of veterinarians all over the place, and
Yes.
They can only do what they can do, and they kind of have to just know, their patients can't tell them what's wrong and what hurts. And so they feel badly, and that weighs heavily on them. So medical doctors, dentists, police officers, veterinarians, financial services, real estate agents, electricians, and lawyers. Those are shocking to me, really, because like an electrician.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to downplay it for people who are in that profession and feeling badly and having some problems, but that's surprising.
I would ask you to think about who typically is employed in those positions. When you think of lawyers, electricians, financial...
Middle-aged men.
Middle-aged men.
So there we go. But is there something about these professions, Sarah, that... I mean, because you find middle-aged men everywhere. There's middle-aged men here in this building.
Yep.
We tape in City Hall, so there's middle-aged men all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there something about these professions that kind of make it a little bit more, I guess, commonplace?
Sure, and depending on the profession, and there's several, reasons and different things that affect it. But I would say law enforcement is one where not only are we many middle-aged men employed there, but also the additional stigma of that power differential and the stigma of, reaching out for help. What does that mean for me? Does it mean I'm not fit for duty? Will someone think I can't do my job? So law enforcement really does have, I present to law enforcement frequently, including Oshkosh Police Department.
And I get that one.
I often tell them, you are more likely to die by suicide than you are to die in the line of duty. And that is a statistic that is nationwide and also local. So suicide is definitely a problem. Medical doctors and the medical profession in general, I think COVID really did a number on the health profession, and really they really struggle. I think dentists and I think also professions like chiropractic and veterinarians, again, those are professions that don't, you see high achieving, typically, not always, middle-aged men or men going into that profession, high achieving, and depending on their course, their professional course, maybe not the most admired. As maybe medical doctors might be, or a surgeon, or
So someone would rather bite a dentist than admire them.
Sure. So, but there's a variety of reasons. You think about all of this. You think about student loan debt. You think about reimbursement rates for a lot of these professionals, and there's a variety of reasons.
Yeah, the financial services, the real estate agents, and the electricians is still sort of. I'm trying to wrap my head around those. And the one that I know is high, The number is high, but it's not on that list, is military veterans.
Yes.
And so we want to talk about that because they're very prone to committing suicide. Now, I wish that I had a more recent number than this, but since 2007 it says there's been a dramatic rise in suicide among veterans. Maybe you have statistics about veterans committing suicide, but you know, I think we can all understand why they would be at really great risk.
Yeah, we recently, Community for Hope is really focusing in on the veteran population with our new program, Project Safeguard. So Project Safeguard is an offshoot of the John D. Mason Veterans Gun Shop Project in the Madison, Milwaukee area.
Okay.
And so this was started to specifically offer resources to gun shops and gun sellers, as well as offering safe storage. So we know that veterans typically have more than one firearm in their home, and we know that a majority of them keep at least one of those loaded at all times. And so if a veteran is experiencing a mental health crisis, it's extremely important that they have resources and opportunities to safely, voluntarily give their guns to a reputable gun shop that can hold that firearm until they feel that they're safe to have it back.
Okay. Or until such time that they want to go to a firing range or, you know, whatever.
Correct.
I mean, I think with the Second Amendment as it is, I think a lot of people have firearms in their homes, and I think that's one of the reasons we see the commercials that we do on TV about safe storage and keeping it away from where kids can get it. You know, and kids are resourceful, let's face it.
Yeah.
Even young kids, they're resourceful.
Yeah.
And if you can think about where kids can get, they probably will.
Absolutely.
So you got to put them in a safe place or have a gun lock on them or whatever. And
we do know that the more time that you can put between the thought that someone has about suicide and the action, the less likely they are to actually take that action of dying by suicide. So the longer we can put in between, whether that's it takes them longer to go and retrieve the gun, or it takes them longer to get the gun lock off, or it takes them longer to find the gun, we know that they're less likely to kill themselves with a firearm.
do we have, and I know it is going to vary from person to person and situation to situation, but do we have some sense of approximately how much time that is that will help sort of to, I guess I'll use the word diffuse the situation?
Sure. So I'm sure that there are probably some standard times out there. I really don't think it's very long. Probably less than 20 minutes if we can get someone between 10 and 20 minutes to just take that amount of time to be able to put in between the idea and the action.
Okay. And I want to talk more about the project. But I do want to remind folks that, you know, if you or someone that you know is in distress, or even if you think there's a possibility that they might be facing some kind of emotional challenges, you can reach out to communityforhope.org, and the quickest way to get somebody is to text or dial 988. It's on your screen right now, but for people who are listening to this on the radio, either text or call 988. And that is the simplest way to reach someone, lickety-split, for whatever the situation may be. And if you think that there's someone who might be in danger, or you feel like you might be in jeopardy, and not feeling all that secure about your mental health status at that moment, I guess that's the best politically correct way to state it.
Sounds
Just
good.
do not be afraid to text or dial 988, because there's wonderful people on the other end, and they can put you in touch with other local resources, which we will talk about in a little while, but they will help you. So please do not feel like your situation is not worthy of a phone call, or that you are not worthy of a phone call, because you are, and it is. So let's talk a little bit more about this Project Safeguard. What does it do? How can someone become involved in it? Talk to us a little about, well, I know that when you sent me the information, there were some statistics that were associated with that.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about that? You've got them and I have them, so go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. So we know that 3 in 5 firearm deaths are suicide. So we know that a majority, and also that most suicides are completed with a firearm. So we know
that was a good question.
Firearms are the most commonly used means of suicide. And we know that we live in a high gun owning state, a high gun owning county, and so firearms are very prevalent. They are very much a part of our culture and a part of who Wisconsinites are. And so this project is really not meant to be political in any way. It's not meant to take away anyone's guns.
Yeah.
It's really meant to offer additional resources for people to be able to voluntarily surrender their firearms for a short period of time.
Sure.
There is a website, betherewis.org, BETHEREWIS.
All right, give that to me again.
Betherewis.
Okay.
B-E.
B-E.
There.
Okay, all right.
And WIS.org.
Okay.
And so this is where you can find more information about the Captain John D. Mason gun shop project. And Project Safeguard is a very small branch of that larger gun shop project. Additionally, on our website, we have a tab, a Project Safeguard tab, if you want to go on there, and you can read a recent article in the Milwaukee Sentinel Journal about how that project was started. And on that website, there's an interactive map, and you can see in all of Wisconsin little dots where there are gun shops and gun sellers who offer safe storage. They're part of the gun shop project. It was very interesting. The Fox Valley was blank. So all around us, we had gun shops and gun sellers offering safe storage. They're receiving information on suicide prevention, how to recognize mental health crises in their customers who are coming in to purchase firearms. And so we thought, okay, well, we need to do something here in the Fox Valley. It's been a little more challenging than I had anticipated. We haven't gotten a lot of great positive response from the local gun shops as far as wanting to provide this. And I think there's a variety of reasons. One, there's stigma around anybody who wants to talk about giving up a gun or surrendering a firearm. So what I've done is I've teamed up with some retired police officers. So will you come with me? And so I'm happy to say our very first shop to sign on was John's Sports Shop on Jackson Street here in Oshkosh.
I sold a gun to them once.
And John was wonderful. He, was happy to talk with us, and he said, absolutely, sign me up. So he is our one and only gun shop who has agreed to offer safe storage.
Well, I applaud him.
And we had actually a really great afternoon. I said to him, do you have any pink guns? I'm just interested. I'm curious. He, come on into the back. And so
when you say pink guns, Sarah, are you talking about truly the color pink?
Yeah, I was curious. I thought, do you have guns in any color? I don't know. I was just, trying to engage with him, ask him some questions,
I guess I
it's
never
my favorite
even
color.
thought about guns being in a different color.
Yeah, so apparently they do. You can special order them.
Oh, okay,
So
that way,
then
sure. Or the grips. If you're having a grip on a gun, you could make it
we
a
spent a
different
whole
color.
afternoon. He was educating me about the different guns he had, and and it was a really good, really great partnership. So now it's just a matter of going into other gun shops, encouraging them to take our resources. And so that could mean even doing a QPR training for their staff. Would you like to learn about the warning signs of someone in a mental health crisis, and just giving them other resources and encouraging them to offer that safe storage?
Sure. You said that there's probably a few different reasons why people in this county, for example, aren't signing on to this, gun shop owners and managers signing on to this, other than the stigma, what would be some other reasons that you think?
I've had to clarify to a couple of gun shops that we are not funded by the government. Community for Hope is a nonprofit funded by business donations and grants and foundations. So they want to know that we're not associated with any sort of government entity. And then I think there is also a cost, a slight cost issue, which we're actually really excited to be looking at some additional funding to, if they need an additional storage, gun storage lock or safe, is that something that Community for Hope could provide? So there are opportunities for more collaboration.
So let's say I want to safeguard my guns. Don't want to keep them in my home. I would go to John's probably, just because I've dealt with them previously and they're the only one now signing on to this. So I go to John's and I say, here are my guns. I'd like to be part of the Project Safeguard.
Yep.
And do I pay anything to rent this storage?
Nope, you would sign a very simple agreement that you agree to pick it up within a certain amount of time, because we don't want guns left for years unclaimed. So you would sign a very brief agreement that says you'll pick it up within a certain amount of time, and it is placed in a safe, and then you pick it up afterwards. There's no cost. There's no additional questions. There's no judgment. It is a very safe way to do that. The police departments no longer offer safe storage. So in the past, a lot of police departments would offer that service, that if someone wanted to voluntarily surrender their firearm, they could. But most police departments don't do that anymore. So there are very few avenues for individuals to do that.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about this. This is a question that I would imagine some people might have, maybe a lot of people might have. My gun is now, I'm now a part of Project Safeguard, and my gun is at John's, or hopefully you'll get others signed on as a result of this show and your other many efforts. So my gun is now locked in a safe at one facility or another here in the county. When I go to retrieve it, I can imagine someone saying, okay, Big Brother is always getting involved in my stuff. They're always up in my face.
Sure.
Am I going to have to sign some kind of questionnaire that's going to be intrusive into my mental health status?
Sure.
That may prohibit me from getting my weapon back, that I have a legal right to own and possess. Is there any, how do they go about getting their weapon back at such time that they want it?
They go, they tell them their name, and they retrieve the gun. So there are no additional questions, there are no additional surveys or questionnaires. You already own the gun, so you're not purchasing a new gun, and it is yours to take.
Okay, so no extra questioning. Do they have to bring in like their receipt from when they signed up?
No,
and
no,
do
just
they
a
have to
driver's
show
license.
ID, so they've got to show a facial ID, a photo ID.
Yep.
Okay, and that's it.
That's it.
So no other questions like
Nope.
you, because, well, that's another whole thing I don't really want to get into.
We hope, and I totally understand what you mean. We talk about red flag laws and all of these other kinds of things that
because that happened out east.
Correct, right.
About 6 months ago, when there were 2 mass shootings, within a mile or 2 of each other, and the person had applied for a silencer and got denied being able to purchase a silencer because he checked a box on what I'm going to call a red flag questionnaire.
Sure.
He honestly answered it, and he was, as a result of his honest answer.
Yes,
but I applaud him for being honest.
Absolutely. Wisconsin does not have any of those laws. And again, this is completely a voluntary program. There are no laws attached to it. And it's strictly, what we hope is that the that in addition to offering the safe storage, that John's Sports Shop and other gun shops will also accept our information on how to recognize the warning signs of a mental health crisis.
Sure.
And I was pleasantly surprised that John says we already do that. You know, our staff, we already talk about it. We already know. We've intervened in the past.
Oh, that's great.
And so it's already happening. And that's what I try to explain to people is that we want the same thing.
Yeah.
Community for Hope and the gun shops, we want the same thing, right? We want people to not die by suicide and not to use their firearms.
Or die by mass shootings.
Correct. So we want the same thing. How do we come together for the same thing? It's a very non-political issue. And again, I think the article on our website is really interesting. Chuck Lovelace, who started the Gun Shop Project, really talks about, he's a veteran, and he talks about why he started this project and how it's been very eye-opening for him to recognize that it's really not a political or partisan issue. We want people to live.
Yeah, and we all want that.
Yes.
But I can see anytime you start talking about guns and giving guns up or hanging on to guns, it naturally becomes a political issue because we're sort of programmed, I think, that way.
Every time lately,
every time we hear about a mass shooting, this issue of mental health comes up, but at the same time, the gun laws come up.
Yeah.
And it's always made into a political issue.
Absolutely.
Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. I know how I feel about it, but I know that it has to be a political issue because it's the people in politics who are in our Senate and our Congress. It's them who have to be the ones to step up and do the right thing and make some changes in our gun laws. And please don't write me or send me crap about this because I don't care. That's what we need.
Yes, and in the meantime, getting people to work together and at the very basic level of, let's just offer.
Yeah, I think this is great.
An opportunity.
Just out of curiosity, how many gun shops do we have in Winnebago County?
Oh, we have many, many, many. I don't know the exact number, but between so Calumet, Winnebago, Outagamie, and Winnebago County, I have pages and pages because it's not just gun shops, but there are many individuals who have a license to sell firearm. So it's not just individuals who are employed at gun shops, but individuals. So
that is interesting.
There are many, and so we're kind of taking we're partnering with the Winnebago County Suicide Prevention group with the Veterans Office here in Oshkosh, and also the new Mental Health Connection, the Suicide Prevention Coordinator, Sarah Bassing-Sutton. We're all kind of working together. We've got some other folks from Outagamie County Veterans Group that are helping us kind of combine forces, and we're tackling, I think Sarah was up in Outagamie County several weeks ago, and heading into gun shops with a veteran, and she actually went into the gun range and was able to shoot some guns in the range, and so we're really trying to take this approach of I didn't grow up with guns in my family. My dad wasn't a hunter, anything like that, and so I'm really going in with an educate me on what you know. You are the expert in this. I'm the expert in suicide prevention, so let's figure out how we can do this together. Yeah.
Well, I am surprised that there are so many private sellers.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting topic for another show because I doubt seriously that not to impugn your intelligence, Sarah.
Yes.
But maybe you do know. Do you know what it takes to become licensed? Because I'm sure you have to be licensed to be a private seller.
I have no idea how you become licensed
that's pretty
to be a seller.
Especially if you don't have to be certified or licensed to do that. But I'm just kind of, it's no pun intended, I'm just sort of blown away by the what you're saying.
Yeah. I would say in those three counties, from what I can remember, there are at least 100.
Wow.
Between the three counties. So.
And that's Outagamie, Winnebago, and did
Calumet.
you say Calumet? Okay.
Yeah. And we also include, Shields, Fleet Farm.
Sure.
But a lot of their, they have their own larger corporation protocol and
Sure.
trainings that they do. However, I think we did get some interest from Fleet Farm about at least offering the suicide prevention training and giving the resources.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good. I applaud Fleet Farm for
Yep.
that too.
Yep.
You had stated the statistic earlier that 3 in 5 firearm deaths are a suicide, and that number has increased 12% in the last 10 years. And then 3 in 100 hospital visits on an annual basis are the result of a non-fatal suicide attempt that involved a firearm. And then again, it states what you've said, is that time and distance are
Yeah.
most important in saving lives.
Yeah.
And then there was one other stat also, and we did talk about this. Most veterans, military veterans, own a firearm, 7 on average.
Yeah.
And 33, I'm assuming that's 7 out of, what, 10? Or
Yep.
Okay, because it just said 7 on average. It didn't say out
I
of
think
how
it,
many.
that they own 7 firearms on
Oh.
average. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's disturbing.
It's a lot.
That is, that a veteran would own 7 firearms on average. Wow. Okay. And 33% have one in their home that is loaded, which you talked about
Yes.
at all times.
Yes.
So, and 70% of deaths by suicide are through use of a firearm, which is kind of what we talked about before. Wow. I'm kind of astounded by what I'm hearing tonight, and it's disturbing as well. So, what else do viewers and listeners need to know about this program? How they can get involved in it? I think you said they can, well, at this point, they can go to John's gun shop.
They could go to John's. They could reach out to myself at Community for Hope at our website, our email. And yeah, I'm always looking, like, if you go to a particular gun shop to purchase your firearms or sell your firearms, let me know. Is it something they might be open? Just a conversation, just
Yeah.
having me come in and have a conversation,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there.
I think you and I have talked about this. I know that your predecessor and I have talked about it, but I think I've shared with you also that I come from 2 people in my life have committed suicide. As a matter of fact, they were 2 suicides 2.5 weeks apart. The same month, same year. But my father was very much on board with just relinquishing his weapons while he felt that he was not necessarily stable. And we had a lot of firearms growing up because my father and my brother were avid hunters, as so many people in the state of Wisconsin are. And the night that my mother committed suicide, my father voluntarily said, "I don't feel good. I'm very upset." He had much more dramatic words and some expletives put in there. But he asked my uncle to take all the guns out of the house. And that was many years ago. That was 1980. So my father was a forward-thinking man. But more importantly, he knew what he needed to do to be safe. He also was a veteran. At that point, he was still in the Army Reserves, but he knew. He knew what he had to do to keep himself safe and to keep his 2 kids safe. And I just wish that more people would be like that and think, okay, I'm maybe not in the best frame of mind right now.
Sure.
That maybe I should do something
Sure.
with my guns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else that we need to talk about with respect to that? Because I want to talk about, Community for Hope as well, and what you guys do.
I
and-
think that's it for Project Safeguard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will just repeat this one website for everybody, whether you're watching or listening. BeThereWI.org. Just kind of like be there or be square. So just BeThereWI.org. And is that the primary site for this Project Safeguard
So
then,
that
or?
is the site for the Captain John D. Mason,
John D. Mason.
the outreach program.
Okay.
So that will have information specific to veterans and also the interactive map.
Okay. So I'm just making a note here of one other thing I want to talk with you about. So you already answered one of my questions. I was going to find out how Community for Hope is funded, and you already explained that. So let's talk about Community for Hope just in general. What kind of an organization is it? Who do you serve? You know, is there a cost to utilize any of your services?
Sure.
Talk to me about the basics.
We are a nonprofit. We serve all of Winnebago County and the surrounding areas, so we don't say no to anyone. I did say no to someone in Milwaukee wanted me to come down and do a presentation. I just referred them to somewhere down there. But all of Winnebago County, we offer two main programs. Our prevention programs, which is our trainings, our QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, is a 90-minute free training that we offer to anyone in the community. So some recent individuals, we've partnered with NAMI to provide QPR to the community. We have trained all of Oshkosh PD in QPR, Amro School District, Oshkosh School District, Winneconne School District is trained in QPR. So anybody who's interested in just wanting to know the warning signs of suicide, how to talk to someone about suicide, and where to refer them.
Sure.
It's a real basic training.
Okay. And NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. Okay.
Yep.
Oof, I had to pull that one out of the hat.
I know, right?
I thought, okay, I got the national.
So many
Do I
acronyms.
remember the A? Do I remember that? And so I'm glad I remembered it was Alliance. So National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we've got a local NAMI group.
We do.
Right? And they work hand in hand with you.
Yep.
And I'm sorry I don't have their website information, but if you just type in NAMI, or you want to use the whole name, National Alliance on, I almost forgot it. National Alliance on Mental Illness. And put in Oshkosh, it'll come up. If you live outside of Oshkosh, maybe halfway between Oshkosh and Fond du Lac. I know Fond du Lac has one as well.
They do.
So.
Yep, Fox Valley has one. And yeah, they're actually hosting a suicide prevention, a walk for suicide awareness on May 4th. It used to be something that NAMI did, and then we also did a walk, and we just decided NAMI has more resources to be able to put on a big event like that. So we provide resource information to them to give out to attendees, but they're a great partner in our community.
So their walk is for awareness?
Suicide awareness.
Suicide awareness. And that's on
May 4th.
Okay, suicide awareness. All right, very good. And then, now that the pandemic is somewhat over, I mean, it's not entirely over, but we're at least kind of back to normal, almost.
Yeah.
I still see people in doctors' offices and so forth that have masks on at times. But for the most part, I think we've returned to normal. Have suicide numbers dropped at all since then?
No.
Or really?
Unfortunately, I can speak for Winnebago County. We did see a slight decrease, trending down during the pandemic, but unfortunately, last year we had a little bit of an increase in our numbers. So we have seen an increase, but again, we do a really good job in our county with our health department and other community partners in looking at suicide cases and trying to identify patterns and gaps in services that maybe we could have filled. And so we're not seeing a lot of real strong patterns at this point.
Yeah, I know that you had some numbers for Winnebago County that are pretty recent. What are the numbers that you have, Sarah?
So in 2023, we had 27 deaths by suicide in Winnebago County. And that's up from, I believe, in 2022, we had 23. So yeah. And again, mostly males. And that's not unique to Winnebago County by any means. That is a national statistic. men are much more likely to die by suicide for a variety of reasons. One, they typically use more lethal means, such as a firearm, but we have an epidemic of stigma, mental health stigma, and we need to really work on that.
What about teenage suicide? Because that was, that we always hear about that, and kids bullying each other, and all this just horrible stuff that I wish we could just eliminate with the snap of a finger.
Me too.
But where are we at with teenage suicides?
So when I speak in the community, people are usually shocked to know that teen suicides have actually decreased over the last 10 to 15 years. Yeah,
I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah, they really have. However, one is too many. And here in Oshkosh has experienced at least one teen suicide in the last year. And so although we are very thankful and grateful of all of the positive work that's being done, we're not finished. And so we still need to work with our schools, work with our families and our communities, and helping kids navigate. Life is just different now for teenagers than it was when I was a teenager.
Me too.
And so really helping them navigate the challenges of being a teen.
What do you think, what would you attribute to that the teenage suicide rate has come down in the last 10 years or so?
Well, I think there was such a huge focus on teen mental health, and if you really look at it, and it feels like it's never enough, but we have made progress, and not me personally, but our community partners. When you look at the number of school-based mental health therapists, that was unheard of 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Oshkosh West High School has a room that students can go in if they have a virtual counseling appointment during the day and they need privacy to conduct a virtual counseling appointment with their therapist.
Wow.
I mean, we're implementing things that we never ever talked about.
Yeah. And thank God for technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on the other hand, that technology,
it's a double-edged sword for sure.
It's half a dozen of one, and
yes,
it's just, if we didn't have the technology, then the kids wouldn't be being able to be bullied 24/7.
Right.
When we were growing up, there was bullying going on.
And then you
but
went
you
home.
were able to go home. And by the time you went back to school the next day, it would probably not be going on anymore.
And I think we're in a transition stage where, the adults parenting teens right now, myself included, I'm still learning technology, and I didn't have the technology when I was a teen. So we've got this kind of generation of first-time parents using social media, now parenting teens, and so I think we're all kind of going through just this learning curve.
Yeah. I'm pleased to hear that has come down with teenage suicide rates, but it's discouraging to see that overall the rates have gone up by 4 people in this county in the last year. Let's see. There's another organization here called Zero Suicide Coalition. Is that still a current organization, and do you guys partner with them, or what are they really?
So the Zero Suicide Coalition was a partnership of many different community partners, and actually when I became executive director in January of 2020, I think I went to one meeting before COVID hit, and then that group kind of disbanded. However, we've recently, I'm glad you brought it up because I'm really excited, we just started the Suicide Prevention Action Team. And it's SPA, I like to call it the SPA team. And this is made up of community partners from Outagamie, Calumet, and Winnebago County.
Okay.
And it's similar to the Zero Suicide Coalition. We're kind of rebranding it and creating this group to look at how we can, as a tri-county area, collectively gather and decide on initiatives to prevent suicide.
Okay, so Suicide Prevention Action Team.
Yes.
And so basically Zero Suicide Coalition is no longer, it's rebranded into this.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. So, you know, we've barely scratched the surface here, and we're down to about 12 and a half minutes or so. Let's talk about this QPR training just a little bit more. So if I wanted to just find out more about it and take the training, how much does it cost? You said it's 90 minutes?
90 minutes.
Okay. When is it offered?
It is offered, we're not currently offering it
Okay.
on a scheduled basis. It's open for anybody to call me and say, I'd like you to offer it at my place of business, and we will come and do that for zero cost.
Okay.
So there is no cost. On May 2nd, we're actually going into Oshkosh Corp and training over 100 of their employees in QPR.
Okay.
So businesses, churches, schools.
What if just some friends get together and they say,
Absolutely.
you know, we'd like to do this?
Absolutely.
Is there a cost for them?
No, there is no cost.
Okay.
I even did a little QPR training for some friends. She said, you know, kind of like a Tupperware party, but we're going to talk about suicide prevention. And so she had about 6 or 7 moms get together at her home. I came in, I offered the QPR training and offered them information and resources, and we had a really great conversation about how to talk to their kids about mental health and suicide.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So how can we recognize if we're not taking the training, what are some signs that we can look for to recognize that someone is maybe not right at the edge, but they might be getting there a little bit?
Sure. So the thing that I stress most importantly to people is anything that is outside of the norm for that individual, right? So we don't want to put people into boxes or label too much. But so an example that I give is I have 2 teenage sons, one who's thinks he's a teenager, but my 15-year-old loves to sleep. He could sleep anywhere, anytime. Will sleep till noon if I let him. If I woke up on a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. and he was sitting on the couch, wide awake, I would be shocked. And I would say, what is wrong? What is going on, right? So sometimes we hear people say, like, well, if someone's sleeping all the time and they're sleeping too much, they're probably depressed and maybe thinking about suicide. That might be true if they don't typically sleep. But for example, my son sleeps all the time. If he's sleeping till noon, that's typical for him, right?
Yeah.
I would be worried if he wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
Right? So it's looking at what's out of the norm, what is unusual for that person's baseline.
Sure. I happen to know of someone who is depressed all the time, and I mean all the time, and sleeps all the time. So that's their norm. But yet I know that they're always depressed and they're always in a state of being down. But, you know, I mean, if they don't recognize that they've got an issue, then how do you approach them about it, you know, without offending them? So that's kind of a tricky thing, too. One thing I've always heard, and so I want to kind of pick your brain on this.
Yeah.
One of the things I've heard over the years is if somebody, say they have something, they lose a job or their relationship breaks up, and they're really down in the dumps, of course that's understandable. But one thing that you hear a lot of times people say is, you know, you're not going to do something stupid now, are you? And that's sort of, I mean, it's kind of, you understand where someone's coming from when they say that, but it's really not the right thing to say.
Correct. That's actually in QPR, that's one of our slides. What not to say. You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you?
So why is that a thing not to say? And what would be the appropriate thing to say in a case like that?
So if you say to someone, you wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? You're immediately applying judgment, right? And as soon as you apply judgment, you've lost that person, you've lost that trust and that connection, right?
But I think the thought is, Sarah, suicide is stupid. To take your life is stupid because you are loved, you are cared for, you are valuable. So if you do something like that, that is a stupid thing to do. So I think that's why people say
Oh,
it, right?
Absolutely. I could totally, I hear, sometimes I refer to those as like, I could hear my mom saying that to me, you know, because you love someone so much, you can't possibly understand why anyone would possibly think about that.
Yeah.
And so the goal is to really go in with zero judgment, even if in your head you're thinking those things and wondering and you can't understand. It's important to remember that you want to start where that person is. And so if you go in with zero judgment and just open, listen, that person may not accept your help at that point. But if you go in truly with no judgment and open to listening to them and letting them know you're there for them, they may seek you out at a later time.
So they're talking to you. They're yammering about, you know, what has happened, what's gone on, and you know they're saying, I don't know what I'm going to do without this relationship, or without him, or without her, or whatever. What do you then say to them? I understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Do you want to talk about it, or because I would say, well, you know, if somebody said to me, do you want to talk about it? I would say, well, what in the hell do you think I've been doing? You know,
Right.
I'm sitting here talking to you about it.
Right.
So what's the right thing to say then? Just if you want to talk more, you know, I'm always here.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's the right thing to say?
Absolutely. I'm here with you, and we're going to get through this together. And if you are truly concerned that they might be thinking about suicide, it's perfectly acceptable and appropriate to say, you know, I'm wondering if you've been thinking about killing yourself, because that's sometimes what people think.
Something
Absolutely.
that could be said.
Absolutely.
And then I guess what you respond to next is very dependent on what they say then.
Absolutely. And we know from research, the QPR research, that when you do ask someone directly, have you been thinking about killing yourself, that if they have been thinking that, their anxiety is reduced. So we know that by asking that very direct question, although it can cause us a lot of anxiety and it's a very uncomfortable question to ask, we know that if someone is truly experiencing a suicide crisis, that being that direct helps them feel more hopeful and more connected.
One thing I think that is important to bring up, I know that if someone reaches out and says, I'm feeling suicidal, at least it always was the case that, boy, someone sent out the police to your home, they did a welfare check, and they hauled you away for a 72-hour hold.
Right.
Is that still the case? Or,
well,
because that might prevent some people from saying,
sure.
I feel suicidal.
One thing I've heard, especially about the 988 text line and call line, is that there were a lot of concerns from my own clients that I see in my private practice, and also from individuals in the community, that the police would be called and that's what would happen. I was actually happy to see some recent data from 988, and it's less than 2% of the time law enforcement is called. And so 98% of the time when someone from 988 answers that text or that call, that chat, they're able to provide resources and talk with the person without having to call law enforcement.
Okay, that's good to know too, because I try to put myself in a lot of different people's shoes.
Yep.
And I can just hear someone saying, I'm not calling, I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm feeling suicidal, because they're going to haul me away.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
lock me up for 72 hours.
Right.
What's going to happen to my house? What's going to happen to my job?
Right.
What's going to happen to my pets or my kids or whatever
absolutely.
If I'm not here for 72 hours?
Right. And in my experience, the county crisis workers, the ones who answer the crisis lines, the 988, the goal is really to work with that person and problem solve, get them to a place where they're able to access resources so that we don't have to do a 72-hour hold.
Sure. You know, I'm really happy to see a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing on TV these days. So you guys offer the QPR training, and that stands again for question, persuade, and refer.
Correct.
Okay. So there's one acronym. There's one that I can see the ads so clearly on TV. Is it ASK? A-S-K? Okay. And that stands for what?
I can't, off the top of my head, I cannot remember.
I think I think it's an acronym.
It is.
I think knowledge. I think the K is for knowledge. I don't know. I'm going to have to look it up now.
I believe that one. It's an athlete actually that does the
he
commercial.
Does that, and now I'm seeing them with other people too.
Yeah. There's a variety of different programs. Our schools all use something called Sources of Strength. It's a peer-led suicide prevention group. Most of the districts in the Fox Valley are using that. And there's just a variety of different programs out there.
Yeah, I'm very cognizant of things that are on TV because I watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of news shows so that I can kind of stay abreast of what's going on and better prepare myself for shows like this.
Yeah.
But I keep seeing those commercials, and it did start out with an athlete whose sister, I think. Younger sister, and he was a big brute of a guy, and he was a perfect candidate to do this commercial because he's like, if you just look at physical stature, physical build, you would never in a million years think that big guy is or was feeling like,
Correct.
Yeah, I'm having some trouble here because my younger sister killed herself and I'm kind of shaky myself.
Absolutely.
So I saw those commercials for maybe a year, and then now I'm starting to see more different groups. Groups like I saw 2 or 3 women, I think in one yesterday, kind of talking about it. And it's, so I don't know, I can't remember what ASK is an acronym for, but it's for something or other. So all suicides can't be prevented, can they?
Well,
or can they?
The research says that they can. We know that offering hope, we know that when someone's experiencing a mental health crisis, it's not necessarily that specific crisis, but the idea that there's no more hope, that crisis will be resolved, or that there's hope in the situation. And so we do know that 100% of the time we can offer hope.
Sure. That's why I like the name Community for Hope.
Yeah.
It's such a good name. Just real quickly, if people want to get involved with Community for Hope, like on a volunteer basis or something, what are some of the things that they should be able to do? What kind of volunteer opportunities do you have for folks?
So at the moment, I'm the only employee. We are going to be hiring over the summer and a part-time person so that we can start to expand our groups and our grief support groups that we offer as well. We have an event coming up in the fall, and we're always looking for individuals to serve on our event committee. Occasionally we'll put calls for volunteers out for smaller projects, but the best way that we ask people to volunteer for our mission is to share our information, share our message on social media, or just in conversations. That is really, to us, the most meaningful way that people can support our mission of suicide prevention.
Okay. So share Community for Hope information on social media, and there's really no excuse not to, because we all know that we are all on our phones practically 24/7.
We're even on TikTok. We're even on, I'm
are you
slowly
really?
getting into the TikTok game.
Just about when the government's ready to...
My children are just appalled, but we're on TikTok, so.
All right. Well, I wish we had another hour or two, Sarah, but it's always fun to chat with you about these things, even though it's not a fun topic.
No.
So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Sarah Danahy, Executive Director of Community for Hope. And we've had the numbers and the information up throughout the hour, so please avail yourself of whatever means of hope and help that you feel you need. And even if you're just a little bit feeling like you're in trouble, please reach out, because you are needed in this world. You are loved by people, and you are cared for by people. So please reach out. That's going to do it for us. Until we see you next time, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.